My thanks to all of you for spending some of your Sunday evening with us. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kent Mortimer from Core Justice, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar this evening. This webinar is one of a series of legal education webinars co-hosted by USAID's Core Justice Project and the Colombo Law Society, with the support of the Colombo Law Society President, Mr. Vijaya Gamage, and committee members, Mr. Binara Gunasekara and Mr. Niroshan Sirivardana. Core Justice Project supports the strengthening of skills and knowledge of members of the legal profession, working with counterparts such as the Colombo Law Society. Remote learning opportunities like these webinars mean a wider and more diverse audience, which we hope will lead to a good question and answer session at the end. The Colombo Law Society was established in 1975. It's the largest branch association of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, with close to 4,000 life members representing the civil, criminal, and unofficial bars and the judiciary. The Colombo Law Society makes a vital contribution to the legal fraternity in furthering its skills, knowledge, welfare, and independence, a commitment reflected in the Colombo Law Society co-hosting this webinar series with Core Justice. A couple of notes about our program. The lecture part of this session will last approximately 1 hour. Your microphones will be muted during the session, but we would invite you to send in questions at any time during the session via the public chat option, and you'll see that toward the top along the left of your screen. I will also present some questions to Mr. Kara at the end of the presentation, and he will try to respond to your questions as he can, both during the presentation and after the presentation. If you wish, you can have a full screen by pressing the 3 dots. You'll find those on the right-hand side toward the top. Click, and one of the options is full screen. If you have any technical problems, I'm very sorry, but please feel free to contact the technical resources specialist whose contact details have already been sent to you. Now let me introduce to you our resource person for this webinar, Mr. Erdem Kara, who this evening joins us from Ankara, Turkey. Mr. Kara is a forensic expert with over 20 years of experience. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and a master's degree in human resources development. He worked at the Turkish police forensic laboratories in various positions where he practiced and supervised forensic investigations. His areas of expertise include crime scene investigation, fingerprint identification and development, automated fingerprint identification systems, forensic laboratory accreditation, shooting reconstruction, and criminal investigations. It is now my pleasure to hand to him this webinar, which I think you will find to be very interesting. Mr. Kara, good evening, or I should say good afternoon, and we welcome you back to Sri Lanka for this presentation.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you and with the audience. Thank you. Okay. Okay. I hope everyone can hear me. Sound and clear. Yeah. So this is the third. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the responses. So this is the third and the final presentation about the forensic sciences that are in relation to legal proceedings. Try to give a broad idea on how forensic science and physical evidence can be utilized in the criminal cases proceedings. What are the value of them? Silent witnesses, fingerprints, and other physical evidences that we mentioned. And tonight's webinar is an interesting topic. It's about shooting reconstruction. Shooting reconstruction itself involves other disciplines like ballistics and firearms that we are going to touch hopefully during this webinar. So the goal of this webinar is to share information on shooting incident reconstruction and related topics. Firearms that are used in criminal cases may reveal critical information that can be used to serve justice. Interpretation of physical evidence based on scientific calculation can be critical for a case file. So the objectives of today, this evening's webinar is going to be the nature of shooting reconstruction, basic ballistics terms. I'd like to underline that this normally shooting reconstruction is a one-week course itself, and we're not going to go into the details. The topics that we're going to discuss, the information that is going to be shared with you tonight are need to know based on your criminal cases. And when you receive forensic reports, we want you to be familiarized with those terms and explanations in those reports, so you can object or understand or lead your way from there on. Evidentiary value of firearms, gunshot wounds, and gunshot residue. Just to warm up a little bit, we have a short quiz that I'm going to open in a minute. Just a quick reminder, once you mark your answers, you're not going to be able to change your choice. So please bear this in mind while you're marking your answer. Okay, here's question number 1, and let me start the quiz here. Yeah, a crime scene reconstruction is a cut and dried permanent picture of what happened at the scene of a crime. B, the building of an actual small replica of a crime scene. C, the presentation of physical evidence only to rebuild the scene of a crime. D, the process of finding out how a crime was committed by interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence, and testing scientific theories. You are invited to answer this question. There should be options on your screen. We have 41 participants, and I only have received 17 up till now. 18, 19. Okay, the question asks, what is a crime scene reconstruction? Is crime scene reconstruction? Right. Something happened and I lost the screen for the marks. May I please ask to mark your answers again? Thank you. Yes. Yeah, we have now 30 answers. Yes. And I'm going to continue. The crime scene reconstruction, correct answer is D. Crime scene reconstruction is an analysis of the physical evidence and circumstances of a crime, theorizing how it occurred, and the scientific testing of that theory. So there is a theory formation based on the scientific facts. It's not fictional. Okay, and let me publish the results. Yes, we have 59% marking the correct answer and the rest. So thank you for participation. And here is the next question. Yeah, yes, you may now mark your answers. A computerized ballistic evidence identifying system is called A. Internal Bullet Firing System, IBFS. B. Integrated Ballistics Identification System, IBIS. C. International Bullet Checking System, IBCS. D. Inked Bullet Buying System, IBBS. Okay. Okay, we have now 25 answers. When we reach up to 30, okay, we have now 30. Let me publish the answers. Great. We have 77%. This is a topic that we are going to discuss during our webinar. Integrated Ballistics Identification System, IBIS, is a database with the software that helps us identify, compare, and make a match with the for the ballistic evidence. I just want to remind here, IBIS is also a commercial name for a system that is out there in the market. Not to mention a commercial name, IBIS also is a general term used for the software and hardware used to compare ballistic evidence, IBIS. Okay, here is our next question. It's actually, oh yes, yeah, when bullets and shell casings are shot from firearms, they can leave unique marks which, when examined by forensic scientists, can link a particular firearm to a specific crime. We will be discussing that. So the third question is a true or false. Yes. Yeah. Here is the question. Fired cartridge cases can be compared with known samples of cartridges. Fired cartridge cases can or cannot be compared. So this is the question, true or false. Imagine we have known samples of fired cartridge, and we have fired cartridge that is found at the crime scene. By comparing them, can we find evidence? Can it have evidentiary value? Okay, we have 28 answers, 29. When we have 30, will be a go. Okay, we are 30 now. Here are the answers. Right, we have 80% true and 20% false answering this question. This is a topic, it's a warming up question for all of us. We will discuss how it can be made, and here is the answer. The answer is true. Instead of putting some notes, I just put photos here. This is a cartridge, a fired cartridge, and this is a fired cartridge as well. We will go into detail. Okay, last and fourth question, also a true or false question. Yeah. By examining the bullet holes on hard surface, it can be possible to form a theory on shooter's angle and distance. So we are looking at bullet holes on the surface that is hit by a bullet. and by examining that, is it possible to form a theory on the angle and distance of the shooter or not? Good. We have 31 answers, 32, 33. Okay, and here are the answers. True. We have 97% saying true. Great. Thank you for joining this short warm-up quiz. Here's the answer. The answer is true, yes. By making calculations on angle of impact, that's a term we're going to discuss, on a hard surface that is hit by bullet, it can be possible to have an estimation on shooter's angle and position depending on number of shots. So if we have more than one shot, 2 shots is enough. It's going to be possible to cross-section those lines and find the distance and position. Okay, right. First things first, we need to have the basis. Locker's exchange principle, that was a topic we discussed in our first webinar. Shooting reconstruction as all other evidence based on this principle. What is that principle? It is impossible for a criminal to act, especially considering the intensity of a crime, without leaving traces of his or her presence. This idea is known as Locker's exchange principle, which means that in any crime, there will be some form of evidence from the interaction of the perpetrator with his or her environment. And the position, the job of the forensic science is to find that evidence and scientifically relate it with the perpetrator. Okay. Good. So, what is shooting reconstruction? Shooting reconstruction, by definition, is the development of a likely or probable sequence of events in a shooting incident. The nature of reconstruction involves consideration and incorporation of all investigative information with physical evidence analysis and interpretation molded into a reasonable explanation of the crime and its related events. By this paragraph, we mean that all physical evidence, we're coming in a minute now, plays critical role in supporting our theory on shooter's position and angle from that target. Logic and careful observation and considerable experience, both in crimes investigation and forensic examination of physical evidence, are necessary for proper interpretation, analysis, and ultimately crime scene reconstruction. So the point I'd like to underline here is that it is based on scientific calculations, this theory formation. By applying scientific principles during the analysis of forensic evidence from a shooting incident, the most probable sequence of events can be determined, and it's going to reveal what? The trajectory. What's trajectory? It's the flight path of a projectile. Angle of impact. Is it important? It is critically important at cases where there is a murder and a firearms involved. You may have seen already, or in the future you may be seeing, the position of the shooter, the angle of the shooter plays critical role in determining the punishment, for instance, of a person. I have cases that I have attended like this, and if we have time, I'm going to discuss at the end of the webinar. Vertical and azimuth components of an angle, cartridge case ejection patterns. Right. The trace evidence also plays critical role in shooting reconstruction. Projectile and cartridge case comparison to identify a firearm used during a shooting, or if more than one firearm was used. So analyzing the evidence at shooting reconstruction can tell all these to us. Dynamics of gunshot wounds. When there are gunshot wounds on the body, by examining them, by looking at them, we can get a lot of information about the shooter, about the firearm that is used in this murder. Suspicious deaths, whether it's a suicide, homicide, or accidental, by examining those evidence, we can have an idea. For instance, let's say, actually, I have a very, very nice photo about that. In this presentation, we have a person that holds a gun in his or her hand, and this is supposedly a suicide. And how can we understand it's really a suicide, or someone else has killed that person and handed that weapon into the hand of that person? So by looking at those evidence and forensic examinations, we will have a scientifically based idea, and that can be used in the courtroom. Okay, shooting reconstruction and this scientific method, like all other forensic evidence, the evidence resulting from a shooting incident is evaluated according to the scientific method. Each and every piece of physical evidence, whether it's a fired bullet, a shot pellet pattern, a firearm, or a similar item, lends itself to this procedure of systematic evaluation. For each item, the particular question or problem is formulated, observations made, a hypothesis formulated, and tests conducted. Okay, this is the theory behind it, and we are going to see in short the practical part as well. On-scene evidence. What do we find and how should we treat that evidence found at the scene? I know I mentioned this before, but it's utmost important, this documentation of evidence. If it's not well documented, it may not be used at the crime, at the court, and it can be attacked. Most important activities related to shooting incident analysis and reconstruction take place at the scene. For example, trajectory determinations must be made at the scene. Likewise, the assessment of spatial relationships of items of physical evidence is best done at the scene. What's the distance between a subject and the deceased person, a suspect, and the third person plays critical role. For instance, what is the angle? Recently I've been an expert on a case that a person in a nightclub shot, but it wasn't an intentional shot. It caused another person to die. So the court actually requested from expert whether this was an intentional shot or not. As you all know, this plays a critical role in the maximum sentencing. So therefore, as mentioned in previous webinars, crime scene documentation, I cannot stress more, plays critical role in evidence credibility. All right, variety of physical evidence in shooting reconstruction. As we said in the earlier slides, it's a combination of all other evidence found at the scene. Shooting incident reconstruction encompasses a wide variety of physical evidence types, and as a result, goes well beyond the concept of merely placing trajectory rods in bullet holes. I understand that there are new terms here, trajectory rods. You will see them with your own eyes in the presentation. Various types of physical evidence that must be considered when reconstructing a shooting include latent fingerprints, gunpowder particles, ammunition components, cartridge cases, shot shells, shot cups, etc. Footwear, tire tread impressions, blood stain patterns, biological evidence, trace evidence, and maybe digital evidence and other types of evidence that we should look all together. Another point to mention is seam boundaries. You may remember those slides, those photos from before. Better to keep it large at shooting cases. A case that I myself attended was considered as a happy shooting. A case in Kosovo after the Saturday night when most crimes actually happened statistically. So we were invited as crime scene experts, and when we went there, at the immediate crime scene, there were some fired cartridges, and when we went a bit far, and there were some shops over there, the shop owners were afraid from telling to law enforcement that there are bullets actually, but when we went there, they showed us, and we have found some fired bullets over there, which has great value and plays an important role in criminal proceedings. So the scene boundaries should be wide as wide as possible. What are the basic principles for physical evidence reconstruction? That brings us to a concept called forensic ballistics. It is the scientific analysis or interpretation of all ballistic-related evidence with the purpose of interpreting and establishing the facts in a shooting-related crime. Right. So, how ballistics can be useful in criminal cases? By looking at forensic ballistics, why should we discuss about this? How is it related to us? Because it can tell us what type of firearm was used. And by knowing the type of firearm, it can take us to the owner of the firearm, the caliber of the bullet, the number of bullets fired, where the shooter was, the position of the shooter, whether a weapon was fired recently, if a firearm was used in previous crimes. Is it important? It is critically important. When we find the source is identified as one weapon and it is used in different crimes, then it can relate to one person or one firearm, not necessarily one person, of course. All right. So the forensic ballistics, as I said, we're not going to. It's not going to be technical. I try to make it as interesting as possible. I'm going to even show a short video, less than 2 minutes, and then share some information in relation to criminal proceedings. It is classified into three: internal ballistics, external ballistics, and terminal ballistics. So the internal ballistics is examines the movement and actions that happen until the bullet leaves the weapon. External ballistics is examining the path or the journey of the bullet after it leaves from the gun weapon until it hits the target. And the terminal ballistics is examining what happens on the target. Right, internal ballistics. It is the study of the processes occurring inside a firearm when a shot is fired. There is a term called rifling. Okay, at this point, I'm going to share a video.
You've got the sight picture, you pull the trigger, and within an instant, there is a hole in the center of your target. We're able to see the end result of firing again, but what exactly happens inside the chamber? Internal ballistics is the division of ballistics that studies the combustion of propellant, the pressure developed, and the motion of the projectile along the bore of the gun. Internal ballistics is a very large topic and entails a complex physical and chemical process. When the trigger is pulled, the firing pin strikes the cartridge, causing the tiny amount of compound within the primer to explode.
Oh. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So it says in the video when the firing pin hits the bullet. So all the weapons, they have a firing pin, okay? When they hit here, what we call as a primer, it leaves a mark that we can use to identify that particular weapon. And then what happens is, okay, let's continue.
This explosion burns the propellant, commonly smokeless gunpowder, causing a buildup of gas inside the cartridge. As heat and pressure increase from the burning powder, the rate of combustion increases. When the pressure
Okay, thanks for watching the video. So as you have seen in the muzzle, there are lands and grooves, and the bullet spins inside the muzzle, which leaves marks, twisting marks, as you can see here on the fired bullet, which actually allows ballistic experts to examine and then match the firearm that is shot. So the most common types of internal ballistics are examining mechanisms to determine the causes of accidental discharge. By making internal ballistics, we will be able to find these types. So B, examining homemade devices, zip guns, for instance, to determine if they are capable of discharging ammunition effectively. And C, this is supposed to be C, microscopic examination and comparison of fired bullets and cartridge cases to determine whether a particular firearm was used. Okay. So this is the area where the firing pin hits, leaving a mark. Right. The second category is external ballistics. It is the study of the projectile's flight from the moment it leaves the muzzle until it strikes the target. This moment. Okay, the two most common types of external ballistics examinations are calculation and reconstruction of bullet trajectories, establishing the maximum range of a given bullet. Right, and terminal ballistics is, please recall, it is the examination of what happens when the bullet hits the target. The study of the projectile's effect on the target or the counter effect of the target on the projectile. The target can be any solid or liquid object, but when the target is a human or animal, it is common to use the term wound ballistics. Please pay attention to these two photos here. It hits on the skull of the person, and then it causes, and then it reflects from here. It may happen. Sometimes it exits. Sometimes it can. It stays in the skull. All right. Common types of terminal ballistic examinations: determination of the distance between firing point and target, establishing whether or not a particular wound was caused by a fired bullet, determining the caliber and type of projectile that caused bullet damage or gunshot wound, examination of bullet exit and entrance by examining the holes in targets or the wounds in biological tissue. And finally, examination of ricochet possibilities and fired projectiles. Right, there are a lot of bullet types, and it refers to the projectiles which actually exist the barrel of the gun when fired. The reason I put this slide and the caliber to show you the calibers, because the effects on the target, and especially when we're looking at murder cases, wound ballistics, the calibers play an important role. What makes fired bullets unique? So when a gun is fired, the barrel marks each bullet with its own unique pattern of land and grooves. Please recall in the video there are lands and grooves inside the muzzle, inside the barrel, that causes bullet to spin. And actually it causes, it is also used for accuracy, but this is not the subject of this webinar, leaving marks on the fired bullet. So experts compare bullets and spent cartridge casings from a crime scene with bullets and spent cartridges shot from the suspected firearm. Rifling is the distinct signature, actually, of grooves, scratches, and indentations, which are of value for matching a fired projectile to a firearm. Okay, fired bullets, what we can obtain by examining them. The examination reports can tell us what. When a gun is fired, the barrel marks, okay, this is the same one. So, barrel marks each bullet with its own unique pattern. Here is another photo. Land and grooves here. It will touch here, and then here on this surface, because of the land and groove structure of the barrel, we're able to identify. Okay, how it is made: matching of bullets, fire bullets from a suspected weapon with the aid of a comparison microscope. Compare these test fires to the subjected bullets. So striations must be identical for a positive match. Let me just say a few words about these photos here. Actually, there are two photographs brought next to each other. So, and it is matched. Try to be identify if it's coming the marks from the same source or not. Okay, better slides. So marks on fired bullet. Please pay attention. The marks here made on fired bullets. Okay. Yeah. Fired cartridge cases. Please recall the video when the firing pin hits this part of the bullet, it leaves a mark, which you can see here. And those marks are examined at three-dimensionally on computer systems and try to match with the with other fired bullets and with the firearms. And also another point here, the extraction part of the firearm is going to leave an extraction mark here at the cartridge case, and these marks are also comparable. So when you find, or when there is a fired cartridge like this at the crime scene, that's a great value. Okay, could you please upload and send the PowerPoint presentation? Is it not on the screen? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Good, great. So bullet comparison. This is a microscope, big scale. It actually magnifies, and please look at the land and groove marks on the fired bullet and the needle, what we call firing pin mark on the perimeter on the bottom of the bullet. Please pay attention here. There are softwares powered by lots of CPUs, makes it three-dimensional and enables comparison. So, thank you. So look at the bullet marking. This is the test-fired bullet, and this is the suspect bullet that we have at the crime scene. For those who have attended the fingerprint webinar, we are searching in different databases. We had their latent print database, and here a suspect bullet or database that we are going through this database that can tell us, it can actually relate two different cases if it's a match. Okay. Yes, image analysis, integrated ballistics identification system. There are computer systems that are trying to identify the same mentality. It brings a candidate list, and at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the operator to confirm a match. All right. Another topic, lots of debates about it. I just want to share it with you, tell all the debate points as well. What is called the gunshot residue. Please remember when at the video, there's a gas formed pushing the bullet from the barrel, together with the leaving of the bullet from the barrel. Also, gases, free gases are released from the barrel. So these gases will stick on the hands, at the hands of the shooter, and also on the clothes of the shooter. So all firearms explode gunpowder. They produce gunshot residues when fired. Gunshot residues are the traces of smoke and particles of unburned powder carried sideways from the firearm by the expansion of gases as the bullet is fired. So gunshot residues containing nitrates can stick the person holding the firearm and leave evidence on the shooter. Okay, this is shooter. It's a simulation with the GSR. It's not readily visible to the naked eye, and there are techniques to collect gunshot residue. I'm going to show them to you. Yeah, this is a photo that shows the gases that are released from a firearm when there's a shot. And how is it collected? Previously, there were some techniques that we used to use a cotton and a chemical to collect a GSR, what I'm going to call them GSR, gunshot residue. But now, because atomic absorption method is used, there are kits available to collect from the skin, outer skin, and then collection from victim's hands, inner skin, handling. So the GSR also can be found in the hand, arm, face, hair, or clothing victim. Chemical testing can detect residue even if removal is attempted. The distance from the victim to the shooter can be determined by examination of the residue pattern on the victim. Okay, before we go to the angle of impact, so there are debates about the GSR evidence. For instance, one of them, if somebody washed his or her hands after shooting, does GSR still stay? The answer is yes. It stays up to 4 to 6 hours. So it is critical to take the suspect and take his GSR. Also, one of the other debates is cross-contamination. When there is a dead body and then a witness, for instance, comes into contact and touches the firearm, may have GSR in his or her hands. So it is a critical evidence. How it is used should be carefully examined. Yeah, okay, that's actually the heart of this presentation, angle of impact. When there is a shooting at the surface that is hit by the bullet, it hits with a certain angle, right? And by examining the surface, for example, this is an entrance and it is with 90 degrees, 80 degrees, 70 degrees, 50, and so on. As you can see, the less the angle, the wider the mark. And luckily, there is a method of calculation. So just by looking at this hole, imagine you don't know the angle, you just go to the crime scene and all you see is that hole. By making calculations, it is possible to make an estimation of the angle of the shooting. Yeah, this is the angle of impact. I'm not going to go into too much detail, just to give you an idea that this is possible by making actually triangulation and some calculations, sinus and arc sinus. We use actually scientific calculations in this part of our job. So this is the hole, this is what we see, and this is the impact angle, right? And this is the device which we call caliper. It measures, it helps us make minute calculations on the hole. Yeah, so the entry and exit, these marks are critical here. These are going to tell us which part is entry and which part is exit. All right, here is I'm going to spend some time here on this slide. So this is a bullet hole, and an imaginary ellipse is formed here. And then the distances between that A and B is measured, and C and D is measured. And the entry angle, also what we call the angle of impact, is going to be division of this distance, CD, over AB. So we're going to obtain a decimal, 0.55 or whatever. When we take the arc sinus of this, it's going to yield us the entrance angle. So again, I'm telling this is a possibility at shooting cases. It helps us to form a theory on the angle of the shooter. And especially when we have more than one shots, they are going to, we will use ropes and extend at a certain angle that we found by making calculations, and they're going to cross at a point which is mostly the point of origin, the point where the shooter was standing. So this is from a course that I delivered recently. We made some shots on these cars, and by just examining the bullet hole here, we found the angle and then extended the rope towards a certain direction from which came. This is actually me making measurements on the fired on the hole at the car. Okay, please pay attention to the ropes here. We actually made two test fires, one here, and then those officers who did not know where we shot, how we shot, from which angle, by making analysis, finding angles, it crossed at one certain area, telling us potential position. So there are kits available, rope lasers are used for longer distances, and those trajectory rods, as I mentioned before, trajectory rods are put into a bullet hole and then extended according to the found angle, showing us the direction. All right, gunshot wounds. It is important to have an understanding of bullet holes in inanimate objects and the ways their appearances are affected by changes, muzzle to target distance, and changes in ammunition. What this helps to us, such knowledge allows to recognize certain characteristics associated with close-range shots as opposed to distance shots, for example. Please recall our example in a homicide or suicide. So we're going to be looking at the photographs right now. When we see some certain burn marks on the skin, it can tell us whether what is a close shot or a shot from a distance, which may be critical in homicide, suicide distinction. So likewise, it's important to be able to recognize the general characteristics of bullet wounds related to distances of shots. Okay. Yes. Another critical point to mention is the autopsy. In the autopsy, the medical doctors, the forensic doctors, I should say, are able to should be able to find the angle in a case where firearms are involved, telling or reporting. They should be able to report the angle that the person received on his or her body, as you can see on these photographs. Okay. Some bullet entry and exit basics. Bullets penetrating targets approximately 90 degrees tend to produce a circular entry holes or wounds. So if it hits with a 90 degree, then we expect to see a round circle. And bullets penetrating less than 90 degrees tend to produce oval entry holes or wounds. The smaller the angle of impact, the longer the oval entry hole or wound. Right. When a weapon is fired from any distance, such that gunpowder particles, please recall in the previous photographs, the gunpowder releases from the muzzle or the barrel. If the distance is close with the target, it's going to leave burn marks. As you can see on this photo, these marks are caused by the from the gunpowder. Partially burned and unburned gunpowder particles are expelled from the muzzle upon discharge along with soot. So if the muzzle is close enough to the victim, both soot and stippling are likely to be present. Yeah, please pay attention here, the burning marks here on the skin. Okay, this is a hard contact wound with blackened, seared margins. Okay. Yeah, this is a loose contact. It's not, yeah, it's a loose contact wound with soot deposited in zone around entrance. Yeah, actually it's shown here. We have some characteristic marks on the skin if it's a close shot. A star shape usually is expected as in this photo if it's a close shot, and also this is a near shot. Example. All right, this is remember our gunshot residue slide. So these are, I don't know if you can read this, the blowback blood spatter pattern on the hands of these individuals who died from self-inflicted gunshot. Please pay attention the blood patterns on the hands, and also examination of gunshot residue may tell us whether this came from that person or not. Okay, here is this one photo. There is blood obviously here, and then the person has a firearm in his hand. What are the things that that we should expect or request, I should say, from this scene? Imagine it's a suspicious death. Some people are saying that, of course, it should be supported with other evidence that no, this person was a nice person, or he was in no spiritual status to commit a suicide. It must be a homicide. So what evidence we should be looking? There is something called, I'm not going into detail, rigor mortis as well, the stiffness of the body. As you can see, his hand, arm, I should say, in this position, it is the stiffness of the body because of the decomposition of the blood cells after that. Please pay attention to the fingers. It's stuck there. It's like iron. You have to do a little massage to open the hands of that person. Yeah, looking at the hands and at the autopsy will tell us. All right. So, yeah, this brings us to the end of the webinar. I think we can now take the questions. Thank you.
I think that we have a couple of questions on the screen there. One of them is, I think that the gist of the question is whether time can damage evidence, this evidence. The question specifically is how can we identify if the murder happened a few days ago? And you've addressed that a little bit. Anything else you want to add?
The time.
I think I did a really good job of confusing things, didn't I? I'm sorry.
No, this is because I didn't see the question. Maybe if I see the question.
Yeah, the question, let me just read it for you. How can we identify if the murder happened a few days ago?
Okay. Thank you. Well, we will look at, we will obviously examine the body. Okay. So this rigor mortis, please search for it. It's the stiffness of the body, and by looking at how stiff the body, the examiners are able to estimate the time that the person has died, like 24 hours or 36 hours, like that. Also, there is another interesting area, entomology. So when the person dies, little worms start forming in the body. So if it's, let's say, there are calculations, and entomology is a scientific area by itself. They look at they measure the worms, larvas, and they will be able to tell you estimation of that person's that time. Of course, it needs to be supported with other evidence, like if there are security cameras and witnesses that are telling hearing a sound and stuff like that.
So we're getting lots of questions, and I'm going to do my best to try to maintain a kind of a thread of topics, but also to reach as many of these questions as possible. So I may end up taking some of them out of order. Along the lines of timing, how long does GSR last? Is that something that you have to test right away, or does that remain for a while?
Well, the general acceptance for GSR is 4 to 6 hours. That actually it depends on the conditions. I mean, if the person has washed his hands, because it sticks on the skin, we expect it to be there 4 to 6 hours. If not washed, it can even stay longer, up to 12 hours.
So on Thursday you talked about fingerprints, and I remember you saying that almost in every circumstance people have different fingerprints. And I think one of our questions is sort of the fingerprint question as it has to do with guns. So let's say you have two 9mm Chinese pistols manufactured by the same company and essentially the same model of gun. Will they produce identical ballistics results, or will they be different like fingerprints?
They will be different. They will be different like fingerprints. They leave each weapon. They leave so the marks that are left on the bullets changes from one bullet to another. This is how the ballistic science actually is formed, and they are able to identify the differences and report them.
One question that we had was that if we have a thick surface, yes, how can we identify the angle?
So Okay, I had a nice photo I didn't put here. So, so what I understand from that question, it's not a penetration. The bullet does not penetrate; it hits and then reflects and falls down. Um, we usually call this ricochet phenomena. Uh, in that, we're still able to look at the marks that are left, and by making measurements, the long part and the short part should be giving us an idea of angle of impact.
One of the questions, and I think
Yeah.
this relates back to something that you said at the very beginning of your talk, and that is that one of the things that this type of science can do is distinguish between homicide and suicide and even accident. What are some of the specific factors that you would use to distinguish between those three different causes or motivations?
So in like in the photo that we just looked, the first thing I would do is take the weapon and fingerprint to see if there is a another suspicious fingerprint on that weapon, and then the autopsy entrance of the bullet, a close shot or a shot from a distance, is going to be another determining criteria. In suicides, we may expect like a suicide letter. Usually people and document examination of this suicide letters also tells us, because the perpetrator may want this to look like a suicide, and he or she writes the letter, and examination of that document examination with the previous writings of the deceased may also tell you give you some idea.
We have opened or turned on all of your microphones. I'm going to continue asking questions unless somebody wants to ask a question using the microphone on your computer. So please feel free, and you're also willing to continue typing them, but I know sometimes it's easier to just ask orally. So your microphones are now on. Are there any questions that you want to pose to our expert? Well, as I said, I'll keep asking questions, and one of the questions that we have that was typed in is relating again to timing. If the body or the flesh has decayed due to a delay in identifying the body, or if the body has been immersed in water or buried, how does that impact your ability as a scientist to examine the scene and do a ballistics analysis?
Due to delay in identifying the body, there's water or buried in land. So in this situation, how could the can be proceeded successfully? So there are two parts actually of this question. If a body is found immersed in water or buried in land, if in water, immersed in water, we would expect bloating of the body. The forensic autopsy should still be able to, by using the trajectory lines, tell us the entry angles and stuff, because it depends on how many days. It says in 3 to 4 days. because of the bones of the body, it should still, to a certain degree, be intact, allowing the forensic doctors to identify the angles. I would expect. If the person is buried in land, that's and I assume the question is still to 3 to 4 days. It should still be good to find examination and find forensic evidence, ballistic evidence. I typed here Edward Hosky. He has a great book on shooting reconstruction for further reading. And please feel free to ask questions. As Kent mentioned, you are now unmuted, and I'll be happy to speak to you. Can you find GSR on shooter who fired with a long barrel gun like T56 or 12 bore shotgun? Yes, because the recall the video. So the loose part and the bullet is the when the bullet leaves the cartridge. I mean, those fired gazes, they are released on all dimensions, and they're going to stick on the person who shots. But also, please recall, GSR is an area that bears some debates itself. So the documentation and preparation, the kits, testing should be done carefully. Okay, another question. Can the direction of the bullet get changed inside the body? Yes, it can. I have great photographs on that, actually. So it not necessarily when the bullet hits, it doesn't have to exit directly. It may change its direction inside the body because it hits a bone, causing more damage. If I can find which slide was that? So again, IBIS, please recall our fingerprint presentation. It is a software with hardware. It stores firearms data, bullet data, remember those marks, and then cartridge, and it will search the database, which will provide here in this spot, which will provide great report and allows making connections with previous cases. So to answer that question, can the direction of the bullet get changed inside the body? Yes, the answer is yes. Please pay attention here. The bullet enters here. Let me magnify a little bit. It enters here. It hits this section of the skull, and then it changes direction. It may be the case that it exits from here, but in this, there are cases that it's even, I know cases that it hits here, then hits here, and then may even stay inside the skull. Okay, does it make significant difference depending on direction of the wind or weather, like firing in the rain? yes, they both have some effects, but not significant effects, I would say, because the bullet, the power that is pushed behind is so high that it goes directly and smoothly. The firearm types and bullet types plays a critical role. Some of the bullets, they have a little amount of gunpowder inside. Please look at here, and some have more, which will have effect on the combustion and the pressure caused.
I have a question. I've heard a term, forensic gelatin. What is forensic gelatin, and how do you use that?
Forensic gelatin. I'm sorry, I haven't heard it.
Okay. I was led to believe it had something to do with test firing rounds, but maybe I misheard that.
I don't know. Yeah.
What other questions? Here we go. We have another question for you.
Okay, whether trained sniff dogs able to identify and recognize the GSR by matching victims and suspects GSR, assuming within the 4 hours in crime scene vicinity. The trained sniff dogs are used in many areas, as you all know, in drugs and everything. They still, for that purpose, they can be, but the critical point here is the documentation. So can you present in the court, oh, my dog sniffed that, and how can you prove that? I was actually asked that question when I was doing 1 week shooting construction course. I heard it's still on research level in France. Some scientists based on sniff dogs doing like that. I'd like to mention that forensic science has to be based on scientific facts and based on experiences that are indisputable. So in the GSR, when I receive GSR from a suspect and then analyze it under atomic absorption device, it provides a report that I can present in the court saying that in the hands of Erdem Kara, for example, we have identified barium, magnesium, whatever elements present in the gunpowder, which is going to tell there is GSR, gunshot residues, in the hands of that person. Is it enough to convict the person? It depends. It depends on how is it perceived, how it is challenged. The person may say that, no, I was not there. I was shooting my own gun at another location. So all the facts has to be combined. But the fact in the hand is there is GSR in the hands of that suspect, which we should be focusing on. And of course, relate all other evidence with this. Okay.
I've indicated I think we have time maybe for about one more question, and that can be spoken or written. It doesn't make any difference. We have a written question.
Will the pressure applied on the trigger remains with the shooter, and can it be identified later on him? If so, does it last for how long? I need to read it again. Will the pressure applied on the trigger remains with the shooter? So when the trigger is pulled, it activates a mechanism where the firing pin hits the perimeter of the bullet, causing a combustion within the bullet. I'm not sure I understood the question. The pressure applied on the trigger remains with the shooter. So when the pressure is applied, it activates the system, and the firing pin will hit, causing a combustion and then leaving. Can it be identified later on him? If so, does it last for how long?
Maybe our participant can...
Yeah. Pressure applied to trigger, will it last on his finger?
I wonder if that's a reference to GSR on the finger. I don't understand the question either. Maybe our participant can make that a little clearer.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. Yeah. So when the finger pulls the trigger, obviously the hand and the clothes and even the arms will receive the gunshot, the powder, and it's gonna last, as in the GSR discussion.
Well, I'm going to hope that answered the question, and I want to very much thank our audience for some great questions there, and especially want to thank our presenter for these great webinars that we've had over the last week. And we really very much appreciate your expertise and your wisdom on these areas, and want to thank you very much for the time that you have spent preparing and the time that you spent with us. So with that, I think we will end our webinar. My wish to you, Mr. Kara, and to all of our participants is that you have a very nice evening. And again, my thanks to everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Kent, and thank you all for attending those webinars. Forensic science, it's critical, and I hope what we discussed on these 3 webinars will help you, will give you an idea, will at least ring a bell and light a bulb that you can utilize this forensic tools at your criminal investigations. I believe helping serve justice. I would like to thank very much to the core justice team, and especially Mr. Kent and his team for providing this opportunity to share this forensic knowledge, which I'm in law, and I have great passion on this. I wish you all a great evening and success in your lives. Thank you very much for listening to me.